So, you came here to see a recap of Spawn from issue 1 to 300 in a short part 1 video. Well, guess what? Fuck you. I'm just fucking with ya. I'm gonna be glossing over issue 296 and 297. This is gonna be a two-part, video. And it is a good base to go through the history of Spawn, because that's kind of what he describes in the comic. But I'm just going to use it as a base, and then I'll go into detail on every villain that is shown and every moment that is shown. And then what I'll do is, if you want to see more, I'll release each and every individual issue into their own increments. So subscribe and watch those videos. I already have 3 issues up right now, but I will do more if more people watch them. So, alright, let's get right into this shit. Alright, why don't we talk about who Spawn was before he became a Hellspawn. Spawn was Al Simmons. And Al Simmons was a soldier and assassin who was the best of the best. He was essentially a killing machine. While he was self-righteous, while he was a hero, and while he would save people, he was also cruel. He was also a killer. So obviously Hell looked at this and they were like, hell yeah, sounds good to me. And he even went so far in his heroic acts at one point where he took a bullet for the president, and his country noticed that. Now, since Al Simmons was gaining a lot of traction and many different people were noticing this, Jason Wynn decided to take Al under his wing. Now, who is Jason Wynn? Well, I'm about to fucking tell you. Okay, so appearing in issue number 1 of Spawn, Jason Wynn is the director of the United States Security Group, and that pretty much is an umbrella agency with multiple branches, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, and the National Security Council. He is probably one of the most powerful men in the world, and has politicians throughout the government on his payroll. So, he's pretty damn powerful. And this is why he took on Al Simmons. Now, Jason Wynn was collecting all of these best of the best soldiers and assassins, etc. into one group because he just wanted to fulfill his selfish and greedy desires. He was an evil person, and he would have them enact evil acts even if they didn't know about it, because he's a very good master manipulator. Alright, so since Jason Wynn is such a greedy bastard, he decided to make a deal with the devil, which is Malebolgia, but he's not really Satan, he's just a demon lord. We'll get into that. We'll get into who Malebolgia is in a little bit. Bear with me. So anyway, Wynn made a deal with him, and think of him as a devil character. So he traded the soul of his best soldier, which is Al Simmons, Spawn, in exchange for psychoplasm. And what psychoplasm is essentially a creation of hell. So it's the substance of which hell is created from. It absorbs the thoughts and fears of nearby individuals, and it manifests them in real life. So it's pretty intense. So yeah, obviously Jason Wynn wanted that for some sinister shit. Okay, so what Jason Wynn did with this psychoplasm is he had Al Simmons' memories transformed into a training ground made up of building from his past memories. So they're using his memories as a training ground. It's pretty intense. And they called that Simmonsville. This was a small piece of hell on Earth, and it was run by the US government. But that place was brief, and it was destroyed during Jason Wynn's fight with Spawn when Jason Wynn was the Redeemer. And we'll get into all these characters later on, as I said before. Let's get into Spawn's death, alright? Let's backtrack a little bit, because we've been kind of getting ahead a little, but not too much. Anyway, so Spawn gets killed by his former teammate, Chapel. Now, who is Chapel, you may be wondering? Alrighty, so Chapel is a reoccurring character in the early Spawn universe. He's originally from a comic series called Youngblood, and he was written in a collaboration with Rob Liefeld and Todd McFarlane, which is the creator of Spawn, in case you guys didn't know. He appeared in both the comics and the animated series. The animated series was really good. If you guys want to check it out, you should, because it's not 100% accurate to the comics, but it's close enough. Anyway, Chapel was Al Simmons' subordinate in the CIA, and they both have been paired up on numerous Black Ops missions across the world. So they are very, very, very good friends, and Al trusted him very much. But, sadly, later on, under orders from Jason Wynn, Chapel decided to kill Al Simmons. So that is how Al Simmons was killed. Now, obviously, Al had some loved ones that were mourning over his death, because Jason Wynn obviously covered it up to save his own ass. One of those people, and probably one of the most important people that you'll be hearing about throughout a lot of this video, is Wanda Blake. Okay, Wanda is very easy to describe. Wanda Blake is the wife of Al Simmons. She was obviously made into a widow after his death, and she was very upset about that. And while she was in her weak, distraught, sad, depressed state, Al Simmons' best friend, Terry Fitzgerald, decided to marry and have kids with Spawn's wife. Terry is ex-military. He left it to keep his nose clean and his shirt pressed. He just followed the rules and became a model citizen. But once Spawn came back to Earth, Spawn noticed that Terry has been doing the funny business with Spawn's wife. Now keep in mind, this is all part of Hell's plan to torture Spawn as much as possible so they can bring him to the side of Hell's army and to turn evil, and so he can lead them. But that brings us to Spawn's creation. And who created Spawn? Not only Satan, not only Hell, but Malebolgia, one of the demon lords of Hell. The devil Malebolgia was one of the most powerful rulers of Hell, and he reigned unchallenged in the 8th circle of Hell for 70,000 years. He struck a deal with Albert Simmons to make him the newest Hell Spawn. He was only one of Hell's many rulers, forming an army of its forthcoming Armageddon war against heaven and God. The deal was simple. You sell your soul to the devil, and you get to see your wife again. You lead Hell's army, and you see her again. So, Spawn yelled the one horrifying word that these demons never want to hear, and that is Wanda, his wife's name. And this will be Spawn's goal for a long time. Wanda is always going to be the driving force of Spawn, or one of them at least. She's usually related to his drives in some way or another. Spawn is then given a suit. What is this hellish suit that he wears? Letha of the 7th house of K is more commonly referred to as K7 Letha. It's a completely sentient and evolving neural parasite hosted by Al Simmons. So the best way I can compare it is compare Eddie Brock and his Venom symbiote to Spawn. Just imagine that Venom symbiote is a demonic creation of Hell. Now, the suit sustains its power by feeding on the necroplasm within Al Simmons' Hellspawn body. What is necroplasm? Now, necroplasm is essentially the blood of every demon and creature of Hell in Spawn's universe. Now, you may be wondering, well, then what about psychoplasm? The difference is, psychoplasm can only be used in its own sphere of Hell. So, while that can only be used in its own sphere of Hell, necroplasm can be used anywhere. It can be used on Earth, it can be used in heaven, it can be used anywhere, it doesn't matter. All Hell spawns use it, all demons use it, and it's pretty damn powerful. It's will controlled and it's a magic substance. Now, after he obtained this suit, you must be wondering, well, what happened after that? Well, the truth is, Malebolgia's plan was to bring Spawn back 5 years after his death. So, everything he ever knew had changed by a crazy amount.
Here's to Al Simmons, the best friend a poor number-crunching jerk like me could ever have.
Dad!
Oh, wait, honey!
Daddy!
Someone wants to say goodbye.
Bye-bye, Daddy.
See you later, sweetness.
Perhaps you can do that with me later, mister.
Bye-bye, sweetie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Cyan, let's get you off to daycare.
As they tear away each new layer, there's always an agonizing price to pay.
So Terry and Wanda have had a child named Cyan, and Cyan will become important later on down the line, and Spawn will kind of become her protector of sorts. Now, while Al Simmons, aka Spawn, is in extreme pain from realizing all these terrible things have been going on, such as his best friend has been fucking his fucking wife, and they've had a kid, the Violator, which is one of Spawn's main villains, is nagging him on and edging him on because he is trying to keep Spawn on the right path to lead Satan's army. Now, the Violator is the oldest and most powerful of 5 Hellborn demons, known as the... Honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I never figured out how to say this, so I'm just gonna say it the way I think you say it. The Plebeiac brothers, and the 5 Plebeiac brothers are the Vandalizer, which is the most heavily built of them. He is very brutish, and he's very dangerous to Spawn, because he's so powerful. He first appeared in the Violator miniseries, which we won't get too much into for now, but it was pretty good. But he does show up later in the Spawn saga. When he is with his brothers, he always takes charge, and the Vandalizer despises the Violator more than any of his other brothers. He believes that he is the strongest and he could easily destroy the Violator. However, every time he tries to do that, the Violator, beats the living shit out of him. Because he's the Violator, and the Violator is the most powerful out of all of them. But the Vandalizer keeps trying to murder him and keeps failing. Next up is the Vindicator. Now, the Vindicator is the most sarcastic of all the brothers, and he's kind of a funny bastard. His goal and the reason he was created was to guide potential hell spawns through the bowels of hell. And he even guided one of Spawn's villains through the bowels of hell. But we'll get into that guy later. On to the next, which is the Vaporizer. There's not much known about him, but he is the tallest and largest of each of the brothers. He's the guy with the green spider-like eyes that you can see here. And he is also a dumbass, so there's that as well. The other brother is the Violator. He's the smallest of the group, and he's also very indecisive. So, now that you know what the fucking Plebeiac brothers are, let's get into the Violator himself. Not only has the Violator actually helped in creating the Hellspawn suit, he helps guide Hellspawns towards fulfilling Satan's desire to cultivate Hell's evil souls on Earth for Hell's army. Now, he has been Hell's guide for multiple Hellspawns, not just one. Not just our main Hellspawn. He has done it for many others throughout all these years of time, because there's been different Hellspawns throughout time. Now, because his main form is a clown, he may seem weak or, non-threatening, but if you look at his other form, that's when he's the most dangerous. He's an extremely dangerous foe. He has incredible strength, enough strength to even harm young Hellspawns, and he could kill them with ease. He also knows a Hellspawn suit, like I said, so he knows their weaknesses, and he has the ability to shapeshift, teleport, phase, shoot energy blasts, do all these different things. So he's a pretty damn dangerous demon. He has died numerous times, mainly by Spawn, but he's always reanimated and returns back to life. During this early time period of classic Spawn, he came across 2 detectives, and that is Sam Burke and Twitch Williams. Sam is the more heavy-set, fat guy, and Twitch is the one with the glasses. They are two NYPD homicide detectives, and they are very popular in the Spawn universe. Alright, to give you a good perspective on their different personalities, where Sam is the brawn of the group and Twitch is the brains of the group, I'm going to use a clip from the animated series which I think demonstrates it very well.
Mason, you mafia dirtbag piece of shit. You never looked better.
Sir, I don't think the CSU is going to appreciate you sprinkling donut crumbs onto the deceased.
Oh, I hate early morning. Nothing human up at this hour.
No, sir. Just as civil servants.
Dead mob scumbags.
Nicely put, sir.
Tony Twist's gonna need serious drugs when he finds out. These three bozos were his best hitters. So, one of these things is not like the others. What's his story?
David Bennett, a journalist with the Washington Post. Same as the one at the alley's far end. Except Bennett's won a Pulitzer for his investigative piece on the congressional scandal 3 years ago.
Hey, if it ain't on ESPN, I couldn't give a shit.
No, sir.
Okay, so we got 2 dead reporters from Washington, 3 dead hitters for Tony Twist. What about the other stiff?
Homeless. No ID yet. His prints came up nil.
Probably just an alley mushroom popped up at the wrong time.
Another verbal ace, sir.
Twitch?
Sir.
Find me a connection between all these toe tags, but first, find me something with chocolate sprinkles.
2 dozen, sir.
Half that. You know I'm on a diet.
Over the 300 issues of Spawn, he has obviously had many villains, and I'm going to run down quickly through all of those villains. But something I want you to know is when Spawn started out, and actually for a very long time, and by a very long time, I mean over 150 issues long time, Spawn barely knew how to use his powers. His powers were mainly activated through instinct or through his suit doing it on its own. You know, what he mainly resorted to was his military training, because that's what he did before he became a Hellspawn. So that's why you tend to see this tactical commando Spawn, which by the way first appeared in issue number 6 when he invaded his old military arsenal. But anyway, back to the villains. So Billy Kincaid is one of Spawn's earliest villains. First appearing in issue number 5 of Spawn, we heard about all these brutal murders that have been happening. Now, Billy Kincaid is a deranged child killer and pedophile, and he drives an ice cream truck to lure little children in and murder them, and he really likes ice cream. So yeah, he's not too good of a guy. He was originally sentenced to 22 years in prison, but he got out for good behavior after only 6 years. But as soon as he was released, he went back to his old ways. And because he went back to his old ways, Spawn was like, "Ha! That's a funny one." And Spawn did exactly to him what he did to other people, and he stuck a bunch of popsicle sticks in him and brutally killed him. But after that, Billy returns in issue 8 of the Spawn series. He comes back, and he is brought to the 8th sphere of Hell, where Malbolgia lies and where Hellspawn suits are made. He is given a Hellspawn suit, and then Spawn chops his head off. The end. Next up is Major Vale. Now, Vajor Male is what I was about to say. But Vale is a major in the United States military, and he was first introduced in Spawn issue number 16. So, him and Jason Wynn are both kind of the same thing. They both cover up very horrendous acts and very evil things, so they're both pretty evil. They're both kind of cut from the same cloth. And we talked about Simmonsville earlier, which is pretty much hell on earth, and he was one of the people behind that. Well, since he was one of the people behind that, he is then confronted by Spawn, and Spawn blows his damn brains out. Then we have Sai Gore, and what he is pretty much a cyborg gorilla who was an experiment during World War II where they tried to make an ape and human hybrid, and Spawn then drowned Sai Gore in a flock of bats and worms and killed him, and then Spawn now uses him as part of his resurrection gang. I don't know what you want to call it, but he can resurrect all of his villains now, and Sai Gore is one of them. This next villain is a cool one. His name is Overkill. Overkill first appeared in issue 6, and he was a cyborg hired by Tony Twist to kill Spawn. Now, when he first fights Spawn in issue number 6, it goes pretty badly for Spawn, because this is classic Spawn and he's a lot weaker and he can be hurt by man-made things, and also Spawn knew he wasn't able to waste his power, otherwise he dies, so he was trying to not use his power but fight Overkill at the same time, which doesn't go too well. But in the next issue, Spawn finds a way. He gathers a ton of weapons from his arsenal, and he stabs Overkill's eye out and murders him and rips him apart with those guns. He beats the living shit out of him and kills him. And Overkill is also part of the resurrection crew. So Ab and Zab, let's talk about them. They first appeared in issue 95, and they are both freelancer demons who possess the abilities to open gates between realms. So they could bring any demon they want onto Earth or whatever, you know? So it's pretty crazy. So the two get hired by Malbolgia to return Urizen to Earth, which we will get into who Urizen is, but just know he's a god. And when they arrived in Pennsylvania, they lit bodies on fire and they performed a ritual which brought Urizen to Earth, and he went on a massive rampage. So that was pretty nuts. The Redeemer is pretty nuts. When he was first introduced, they called him Anti-Spawn, but they realized that name is pretty gay, so they didn't want to call him that anymore, so now they call him the Redeemer. First, there's 3 Redeemers, and we're going to go through them all very quickly, and I'll just brush over their histories and backstories, but I'm going to tell you the basics of what a Redeemer is. So, a Redeemer is a person taken by heaven, and they fuse them with elemental heaven fire, and then they put this suit on them, and they pretty much become Hell's ultimate weapon, and Hell's answer to everything that's dark and evil, and Hell sends them out to kill those things. Now, the first Redeemer was Jason Wynn. We already talked about Jason Wynn and who he is, so when he turned into the Redeemer, they took him into heaven and they fused him with the elemental fire. And this burned him pretty badly. Yeah, he wasn't having too good of a time here. So he was in a lot of pain because he's not a truly holy person, which that's what they should be choosing, but they're not choosing that because they're scavenging for anyone they can to fight this new Hell Spawn. And then Spawn fights him, and he is kind of getting his ass kicked at first, and then Spawn continues fighting him, and then Spawn blows his head apart. Then Jason Wynn gets sent back to heaven, and then heaven's like, yeah, this guy kind of sucks, so let's not use him again. The next Redeemer is Phil Timper. He's constantly in and out of juvenile detention in his early life, and he was finally convicted and incarcerated for 2 years after doing Grand Theft Auto. And come on, Phil, you know we shouldn't be doing this. Now, while he was doing time in prison, he did give himself completely to the Lord's bidding, and he was worshiping God, and he was very religious. And then he became a model citizen over the course of 11 years and married with a wife and kids. And he also was a minister at a local church. Well, he was training to be one, but he got abducted by angels and he got imbued with elemental fire. So yeah, he became a Redeemer. And then what happened is he attacked Spawn, and by the way, he first appeared in issue 31. Probably should have said that at the start, but now you know. Anyway, he became a Redeemer. He fought Spawn. Spawn sliced his arm off, and the guy just turned into a nuclear bomb for no reason and blew up. And that was the end of that Redeemer. Now this next one is actually my favorite Redeemer because I think he has the most complex backstory and the most complex story in general. His name is Eddie Frank. He appeared in issue 29 of Spawn, and when he first arrived at Spawn, Spawn was damaged and injured, so he literally found Spawn and carried him away. But what we learned before that was that his father was abusive, and he didn't know what to do. So then he eventually took Spawn as an inspiration because obviously he knows Spawn's a fighter. And Spawn, he attacks his abusive dad at one point. Then his dad lets his anger take control of him more, and then the kid eventually shoots him. Then the kid goes to juvenile detention for that. If you're noticing a pattern here, Heaven likes to choose people from juvenile detention apparently. So, yeah, I guess they like to rehabilitate people. But, that happens. Then, he gets out, he goes on a mass shooting spree, and then he gets engulfed in light, becomes the Redeemer, fights Spawn, realizes his wrongdoings, and then recently, in the most recent issue, 300, Spawn actually dragged him into his own reality, which is a dark area, and Spawn talked to him and convinced him to join his fight. So he merged the Redeemer's powers with his own, so he made him like a Redeemer Spawn, and he calls him the Reaper, which is pretty badass, and he looks badass too. Another badass looking character in the Spawn universe is called the Curse. Now, personally, this is one of my favorite Spawn villains just because he is so intelligent and he's so high-tech. I don't know, I just like guys in armored suits, I guess. So, he's a green armored villain, and he was first introduced in Spawn 27. And he blew a giant hole through Spawn's chest because he believed Spawn was endowed with the special powers by God. But then he realized after he shot Spawn in the chest that it wasn't God, and he realized he's a minion of Satan instead. And this guy is very religious, and he wants to get into the gates of heaven, and he wants to become one of heaven's soldiers. So he is just hunting down these different demons and studying these different demons, and he's kind of a lunatic, so because he's hunting down demons. And people like to call him Mr. Kron because his name is Philip Kron. And he wants to lead Heaven's army against the armies of hell. Now, he uses tons of cybernetic parts and different weapons to fight these demons. And he's actually very dangerous because he knows a lot about these demons. So when he fights Spawn, he fights Spawn off pretty well, but Spawn's a little too powerful for him. So Spawn beats his ass, you know, Spawn shoots his arm off, and then Spawn crucifies him. And obviously, the guy doesn't like that, so the guy eventually gets tortured and he gets removed from that crucifixion. And way later on, he actually tricks Spawn into sitting into his own chair. He electrocutes Spawn, he stabs him with the forklift, and then he takes Spawn into his own chamber and he starts torturing Spawn just as like revenge, and he's trying to gain Spawn's powers. So he was trying to harvest Spawn's suit and Spawn's necroplasm. Then Spawn chops his own hand off, has the hand, you know, crawl on its own, Evil Dead style. It punches like a little crack into the glass. His suit comes out. His suit engulfs the curse. And then Spawn escapes. Then we don't see the curse in Spawn for a very long time, because he was in another, you know, series called The Curse of Spawn or something like that. And Tony Twist apparently hit him with a car and shot him up and stuff, and the curse died. So now the curse returned again, but he is dead and he's part of Spawn's resurrection crew. You guys like creepy villains? Well, Spawn has plenty of those, and this is one of them. We call him the Freak. He first appeared in Spawn issue 33, and he's a psychopath. His name is Mr. Kalebit. I don't even know how to say it, so I'm not even gonna say it. But he's a psychopath whose mental illness and delirium was the result of his ex-wife telling him she didn't want children, and he was committed to an asylum, and he later built himself a mansion in the sewers. So when Spawn first met him, he actually convinces Spawn to help him kill Dr. DeLorean, which is his therapist, but he's telling Spawn this crazy story of how he manipulated the Freak, and it's super complex, so Spawn believes him, and Spawn actually goes through with it. Then later what happens is the Freak escapes, and once Spawn eventually finds him again, Spawn suffocates him and devours him with insects and all that jazz. That should make up the Spawn resurrection crew, for now at least, until he gets more. But yeah. Moving on to Ange Ella, one of the most badass characters in my opinion in Spawn history. Not only does she look badass, but she was the most badass bounty hunter of all time in Spawn's history. These angels are sent, obviously like I said, to hunt hell spawns. So she's killed plenty of hell spawns. And she was first introduced in Spawn issue 9, and she fights Spawn, but then Spawn beats her ass, and then she escapes because she's kind of pissed off, and then she reappears over and over again. But the other times that she appears, she's not an adversary, she's mainly an ally. And she actually helps Spawn a little bit on fighting Urizen. And she helps Spawn fight Malbolgia a little bit as well. And I didn't mention how Malbolgia goes, but what happens to Malbolgia is Spawn fights him at first, then she appears, she guts Malbolgia, stabs him in the throat, then he fakes that he's dead. And then when she turns around, Malbolgia kills Ange Ella. Now, Ange Ella and Spawn were gaining a little bit of a romantic type of relationship, so when he stabbed Ange Ella, Spawn went freaking haywire, and he took Ange Ella's sword and leaped at Malbolgia and cut Malbolgia's head off. And that's how Malbolgia died, and how Ange Ella died. Okay, so now that we got through most of his main villains, why don't we move on to some of the major villains, such as the gods and demon lords and jazz like that. Let's start with one of the first ones that Spawn ever encounters, Urizen. Now, he first encounters Urizen in Spawn issue 96. That's when Urizen first arises. And what Urizen is a demon that is older than time. He is a dark god in which he cannot be killed or destroyed in any form or shape. It's impossible. You actually have to contain him. And it actually took the combined forces of heaven and hell to contain Urizen the first time. So he's pretty powerful. Now, the way the fight goes between him and Spawn is Spawn fights him at first, and Spawn actually holds his own surprisingly well for a while, and then Urizen grabs him and sticks him onto a sign. Then Ange Ella takes him off that sign and is like, alright, let's kill this guy before he ends the world. And then Spawn's like, fine. Then what happens is they go to Cogliostro, which we'll go through who he is in a bit, but they go to him and then they say, alright, how do we beat this guy? Then they learn that they have to contain him. Then Spawn comes, and this is the second battle, and Spawn surrounds Urizen in the forest. He uses his elemental abilities to trap Urizen. Then they fight a little bit more. Then Spawn sinks Urizen into the earth and entraps him into the earth. Another one of the most powerful demons in hell is Mammon. Now, originally Mammon was supposed to be the Satan for Spawn, but he isn't Satan. So far, I'd say he's probably like the second closest to Satan, because what Mammon is usually portrayed as, you know, a handsome gentleman, sophisticated, and he's very manipulative. But he is the mastermind of everything. And by everything, I mean everything. Since Spawn was born, he's been manipulating his life even since then. After Spawn comes back from the dead, every event and torturous evil thing that has happened to Spawn has all been part of Mammon's plan. Mammon doesn't have the ability of creation, so he's seeking the throne of creation so that he may remake the universe in his own image, but you know, he hasn't got there yet. His past is kind of shrouded in mystery, but he was loyal to God, and then he refused to fight against their fellow archangels in a great battle. For this, he was banished from heaven and supposedly cast to hell, and we don't know if he's truly a demon or not, but let's just assume he is. He's pretty much a demon, and he learned different spells, and he trained himself in all different forms of magic, and he gained insane amounts of power. So much to the point where he's similar to Urizen, where he supposedly can't be destroyed. I mean, I'm sure you can if you do enough, but he almost can't be destroyed. The way he was locked away was by a spell casted upon him. Before we talk about God or Satan, why don't we talk about the mother of those two beings? This is the strongest being in the Spawn universe. You cannot get more powerful than this being. She is called, well, it's a genderless being, but we'll just call her a she. You could either call her the Man of Miracles, or you could call her the Mother of Existence. The reason why there's two different names is she can split into an infinite number of beings, and those were two separate beings, and then they got copyrighted, so they merged her into one, which is the Mother of Existence. And they kind of retconned her, but because she was in issue 297, which was very recent. But my guess is her story wasn't retconned. That whole storyline is still canon. It's just her name was retconned because of the copyright lawsuit. No big deal. Now, she's walked among the 12 apostles and Jesus Christ. She's walked among everything because she technically created everything. Because she created God, and God created the universe. She also was the one who empowered Spawn with divine powers, which is the powers of God. And that's when God and Satan was banished. But we'll talk about God and Satan now. So let's get into God first. What is God in Spawn's universe? Well, he is based off of the Christian God. So he is an almighty, all-powerful, all-knowing, you know, omnipotent, invulnerable, immortal. Just, he's God. I don't know how else to explain it. He's God. Now, in one of the comics, like when they first appeared, they only explained how God created Earth and how Satan created Earth, because Satan's the same power level. So whatever I'm saying about God also applies to Satan, because he's a twin. So he's pretty much the same thing. He's just evil. But in Spawn Resurrection, they mention how God is the creator of the universe, how he is all-knowing, and the only thing he forced himself to not know is the fate of humanity, because he felt that was a wrong thing to do, and he had time to remember what it was like to be human. And the reason I'm explaining this is because this guy was debating me in a comment section about how he thinks God is a planetary level being, which he's not. There's no way he is. He is God. And the reason I know this is because the Mother of Existence, when she gave Spawn his divine powers, she said, "You will have a power equal to God and Satan." And with those divine powers, Spawn not only was an all-knowing being, he was also an omnipresent being where he could be everywhere at once, and with just a thought, he could wipe out everything in the universe just by a thought. And he could also create life. You know, he was infinitely powerful, he was immortal, he was invulnerable, all those things. So, if that's equal to God and Satan, then those are the power sets they have. God has taken many forms. The first time we ever see God in issue 32, he is an old lady. Then, the second time we see him, it's in issue 158, and he's just like a buff, young dude with like a mullet or something. In Spawn Resurrection, he takes form as Al Simmons' old childhood pet dog. Then, we see him later in the battle with Satan in Satan Saga Wars. Alright, so on to Satan. Now, like I said before, Satan is essentially the evil version of God. He is the twin brother of God, and he always conflicted with God whenever God was making his creations. And obviously, since they're brothers, they have the same mother, the mother of existence. Now, Satan was first revealed in issue 158, because we never really saw him before that much at all. And Satan also wants Armageddon for the world, mainly so he can conquer humanity, because he thinks they're not deserving of their own free will by this point. And God is also allowing Armageddon to happen because he kind of feels the same way. But obviously God and Satan have different types of ideals. That's why they always clash with each other. So what happens is God and Satan both agree to the fact that Spawn is going to unbalance Armageddon. So they send their armies after him. But what happens is the Mother of Existence gives Spawn the divine Spawn powers, and he banishes Satan and God from existence, and they fight in their own reality for however long, up until Spawn Resurrection. Now, Spawn Resurrection, this is the more recent storyline, and what happens with Satan in that is Satan sends his minions on Earth's domain to kill Wanda, Spawn's wife, and he had her soul taken to hell where he awaited Spawn to rescue her. But the only reason why he had her killed and the only reason why he wanted Spawn there was so he could take his own weapon of mass destruction, which is Spawn's suit. So Spawn denies at first and fights him for a while, and then eventually Spawn's like, you know what, here you go, and Spawn gives him 99% of his suit, and then he nukes Satan with it, and Satan is a goner by that point. Okay, last but definitely not least, because this is a pretty important character to the Spawn mythos, his name is Cogliostro. Now we're just gonna call him Cog because that's a long ass name. So he first appears in issue 9 as like some homeless dude, right? But he knows a lot more than Spawn thinks he does, because he himself was once a former Hellspawn. The only reason he won't use his powers is because he's leaving one tick of power because he doesn't want to, you know, bow down to Malbolgia. And we'll get into why later on. But pretty much, simply put, in the beginning, he acts as Spawn's mentor, teaching Spawn all these different ways to use his powers, giving Spawn little bits of wisdom. But after Spawn issue 100, Cogliostro actually states that he thinks he can create a utopia for Earth. And Spawn's like, alright, utopia for Earth sounds good to me. So he helps Cog with this plan. But what happens is Cog has to kill himself to go down to hell. And then eventually what happens is they run into a mysterious box, and Cog tells him that he needs to open it to turn Earth into a paradise. So Spawn opens the box, and it turns hell into an Eden-like world, and he sees Wanda and runs to her, and he gets caught in a trap. But that trap was laid by Cog. So it's later revealed that Cog was born as Cain, the first murderer, and since the beginning he's wanted to rule hell rather than serve it. So obviously the only reason he helped Spawn was to gain the throne of hell, and it made him the new ruler. So he became the new ruler of the 8th sphere of hell, which is where Malbolgia originally was, and he sent Al Simmons back to Earth without a Hellspawn suit, and that was a whole storyline. But recently, like issue 297 recently, it's revealed that he has given up his control over the 8th sphere of hell to greater demons because he's pretty much trying to survive here from Spawn. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed another one of these long ass Spawn videos. If you did, I'm gonna keep on doing them because there's a lot more that I could do, trust me. But we are going to be doing a part 2 of this video. This video was mainly to give you an idea of the different villains and different characters and their histories in Spawn. It wasn't really to give an exact timeline of what happened. I'm gonna do that in part 2. So, as well as give more characters in part 2. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, which you better have, good for you. If not, well guess what? You can shove Spawn's chains up your ass and get off my damn channel. I'll see you guys in part 2. Bye.